morning, everybody. This is Jean here, Jean Truelove from Truelove Quilts for You. I am working on my Dear Jean quilt, my Jean's Block Party 2021. This time, not this week, because the last video I put up was my Dresden plate, and that was a big one. And I've taken a little bit of a break, and maybe from the next this block also. I want to clear something up. We are making blocks at this point in time. We have made our 16 9-patch blocks that are going around my pattern. If you're new to this channel, this is my pattern that I am following, my pattern and my idea. Idea, as you can see, is my blocks around, my sampler blocks. We're making a sampler quilt with sampler blocks, but not in the conventional way of just putting them next to each other with sashing. I've changed this up for my 2021 block party. I'm making a medallion style, and making blocks, different blocks. The medallion style that I'm showing is the center block, is the last video I put up. Again, you can refer back to my playlist, Jean's Block Party 2021, for every single block, in-depth tutorials for each block that I've made. The Dresden plate was our last one, and this week or this time I am showing you how to make, let me put it over here, how to make a applique, how I made my applique block. Now on my pattern you will see that we're at the point where there are 4 corners of the inside square of our medallion. We have made 6.5-inch unfinished blocks, a 24.5-inch unfinished Dresden, and this week or this time we're making a 12.5-inch, 4 of them unfinished applique. Now, this is a practice applique. This is a little bit bigger. I was trying to get my dimensions right because I have to I don't have a pattern, and I'm making up the pattern as I go along. And this is my pattern for my applique. This is called Hawaiian Applique. This is raw edge, but it's finished, as you can see here. Hopefully you can see that, with a blanket stitch. I like my blanket stitch. This could have been finished with a straight stitch, a satin stitch, a zigzag, or a blanket, or whatever other decorative stitch. I chose to do my blanket stitch like I did on my Dresden plate. Now, it might look a little bit complicated, but I guarantee you it's not. What I have done is I show you in depth again how I cut out my pattern, and for this project I used a fusible web on the back, a 2-sided fusible web, to fuse my applique to my background fabric. By all means, you can cut it out a more conventional way. Excuse me. You can back the use glue like I do. You could do a needle turn if you're so inclined, but this is for beginners. A needle turn applique is more of an advanced skill, and I'm honing this to beginners. This may look a little bit difficult, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually refer some of you back to my 2018 block party, where I did 12.5-inch finished 12.5-inch blocks. I did 20 of them. So maybe when I show you my quilt right next door here in a second, you might not want to do this. I'm giving the alternative to follow my tutorials on my 2018 block party, and to do maybe 4 different ones in the corner. And again, perfect your skill. You must excuse me because back then my camera work wasn't as good, but the videoing quality wasn't great, but the tutorial is the same. I show you exactly how to cut, but that would be making 12.5-inch blocks for our 4 corner blocks. Oh, excuse me, something in my throat. If you indeed are following my pattern, if you're just putting your blocks together, then super, just put your blocks together. So this is our 4 12.5-inch applique blocks. I show you how to cut the pattern, I show you how to attach it, and I show you in depth how to make this block. Now I'm going to take you over and show you how far I've gotten along with my quilts so far. I've come to this point where I've done my 4 applique corners. These are what I was talking about. Now, quite a lot of you are asking me, having seen this sort of work in progress up on my batting board, my batting wall here, how big are my sashings or my borders going to be? I don't know. I can't tell you that right now. I'm basically right now making blocks, as I have explained in the very beginning. Because I don't have a pattern with exact measurements, I will be showing you at the very end how I'm putting all of my blocks together. So, as I said, quite a few of you are saying, well, how big is the sashing? How big is the border that you've cut? Well, I can't tell you that because I've made my blocks. This is just pinned on here. These are just pinned up. This is just an idea that I have. An idea. I may make this wider. I may make that a bit narrower. As you know, this is as far as we've gotten. If you refer to my pattern, I'm going to expand it. I'm going to make a larger, about 96, 98 inch, again, however big it turns out, size quilt. I'm going to do a border flying geese, and I'm going to do more blocks around and another small border at the very end. But right now, this is where I've gotten, okay? This is where I've gotten. I haven't even put this together. This is just pinned up here. Here's my 16 blocks and my samplers. Here's my 4 corner blocks. And again, if you don't like, I mean, you might not love the look of this applique. It's a very busy quilt, my quilt. It's an explosion of color. And if you don't like the idea, or if you don't like this applique here, which again, yes, it's very busy, there's a lot to look at, you can do maybe just a small applique heart if you would want, just maybe a heart in each corner, or a little flower to tone it down, whatever you decide to do. But I give you the method of how to cut this out. And if you wanted to just cut out maybe a heart, that's the simple thing to do. Now, somebody did ask about how you would use the dryer sheets for a stabilizer. As you know, I backed this entire Dresden plate because it was heavy with a muslin stabilizer. And somebody had suggested, Brenda had suggested, that she uses dryer sheets, When you do an applique, again, I'm beating a dead horse here, but it rucks up if you just stitch a piece of fabric to the background fabric. It can, with a decorative stitch, it tends to have a tendency to pull and to gather a little bit. So a stabilizer is you would just put the dryer sheet, say about that size, where you're stitching, on the back side here, where your stitching would go. You would just pin it here, and then you would stitch your applique. That way, your whatever stitch you use, a satin stitch, a blanket stitch, even a straight stitch, your background and doesn't ruck up on that stitching there. So that's all. But if you don't want to do this, if you don't love that look, then you could just go to my, again, I refer back to my 2018 block party, and you could just do regular sampler blocks in these 4 corners. This is how far I've gotten. Again, if you refer to my pattern, we have a long way to go. I do think I'm going to be putting sashing, white sashing, to calm it down a little bit. My quilt here in particular, I don't know if I'm going to use the black and white stripe. Again, my quilt is evolving as I go along. And again, people who've been asking me for specific measurements, well, I'm giving you them for the blocks, and I've said that all along. At the very end of the day, I'm going to put my quilt together, and that's when I'm going to be measuring my borders, however big they're going to be, and my sashing, however big that's going to be. And then I sort of jiggery-pokery it to fit. But this is where I've gotten so far. I hope you like it. What I've done here is just a little thing. Again, I've just pinned this on. Instead of trying to either miter this corner or to make this fit really, really well, however, again, this is just pinned on here. I cut out a hunk of fabric. I might do a little cornerstone in the corners here, like up here and over there, just to make it easier. That makes piecing a lot easier. If you just do that, you can sort of mess about then with your sizes. I don't tell you exactly, to cut a border 62 1/4 inches. I don't do that. I make it fit, but I will show you when we get to that point. So this is how far I've gotten, my Dresden plate and my applique blocks. I might make a pillow out of this or something. I was experimenting. But again, don't let this deter you. I show you in the following tutorial exactly how to do it. And yeah, this was fun. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope you guys are too. All right, have at it. This is how far I've gotten on my quilt. All right, see ya. Bye. thing we need to do is to make a pattern for our applique. And what I've done here is I've just taken 2 pieces of copy paper, which measure, what, 8 inches by 11.5 inches, something like that. Or 8.5 inches by 11 inches, that's right. This is 11 inches. What I want to do is I have to put 2 of them together in order to get a 10-inch square. That's all I'm doing. So I'm just putting this on. This is a rotary cutter I use for paper. So I want to make a 10-inch square. Okay? So I am using my mat for this. I'm matching this up over here. All I'm doing is making a 10-inch square of paper. Okay? And that will be the beginning of making our pattern. I always see which line. Yeah, there it is, the 10-inch. 10-inch by 10-inch square. Okay, now with this square of fabric, what we're going to need is you're going to need a marker. With this square of fabric, what I want you to do is I want you to fold it in half with a fold down at the bottom, okay? And 2 folds at the top, all right? Then what you're going to do is you're going to fold that from right over to left, and we end up with a fold on the side and 2 folds down here. Okay? Now I'm doing this right in front of me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top right corner and fold that down to the bottom left corner, okay? And make a nice crease. Okay? So now we have a fold and 3 folds. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to draw a little, just about 1/2 inch in, just like a little quarter circle, just like that. What we're doing is we are making, at this point, we're making 1/8 of our pattern, and it's going to be like those snowflakes that we made in kindergarten, okay? So just bear with me. What you're going to do is from this bottom left-hand corner, I just want you to do a bit of a sweep to about there, okay? I'm no artist, so you don't have to worry about being an artist, because I certainly am not. Now, from that sweep, we're just going to make a little come back on ourselves, and do that, okay? Very, very simple. Now, from this top corner, here's my fold still. From the top corner, I'm just going to go down. I'm just going to make a shallow sweep like that. I can't explain it, but hopefully you just get that by watching me, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to take from this mark here, down here, we're just going to make a sweep up to about there, okay? And we're going to connect the 2. Again, a little loop and connect the 2. This is a very, very, very simple applique, but it looks something when it's done. So now what we want to do is we want to cut out our pattern, but we want to make sure that we're cutting out on the line and we're getting rid of this area here. Okay, this is the area we don't want. All right? So now with a pair, where are they? With a pair of paper scissors, I'm going to just cut out on those lines, and we're going to get our pattern. So I'm just going to start here on this little curved bit right there, little pointy curve, whatever. The beauty of it this way is all of these pieces are going to be mirrored, so they're going to be exactly the same. So it doesn't matter if they're not absolutely perfect, because they're all going to be perfectly the same profile on all 4 corners, and you'll see that in a minute. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold my papers together. Remember, there's 3 folds here. I'm just going to come here. I'm going to swoop around. I'm going to cut on that line. Again, yours are going to be a little bit different, obviously, because you're a different artist than me, but we're all basically going to have the same. Again, I'm going to hold my paper together. I'm going to swoop up there. I'm holding my paper together, and I'm just going to curve up onto that top bit, okay? So now, here is 1/8 of my pattern, right? So now I'm going to open it up. Oh, look, there's a quarter of my pattern. There's a half of my pattern. And here is my whole pattern. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? Now you're saying, well, that's very well and good. How do I get that onto my fabric? Well, actually, I'm going to show you a few different ways that we can get this pattern onto our fabric. Ways that we can get our pattern fabric appliqued onto our background piece of fabric. First of all, what I have done, I have cut from my 4 corners, I have cut roughly a piece, it's just cut roughly about 13 inches by 13 inches square. Okay, I will be cutting my background piece down after I put my applique on top of it. But I want to make sure that my applique fits really nice like that. And I have enough then to work with and to cut it down. Now, when we were doing our Dresden plate, I was telling you how on my large applique, Dresden plate, I actually lined the back of this piece of fabric. I stabilized it. That's what I meant. Now, there are on the market all sorts of tearaway stabilizers that you can get. You can just put it on the back of your fabric here. I have even, as I said at one point, I have even used on small appliques. It has never hurt my needle. I've actually used a piece of paper. I've sort of glued on my applique, and I've just stitched onto the back through my paper and then torn my paper off. Just for the few bits I'm going to do it, it doesn't dull my needle at all. Or, as I was saying in my, Brenda had mentioned in the Dresden plate tutorial, that you can actually put just dryer sheets, use dryer sheets here, attach them, like pin them on. And the reason for stabilizer, again, beating a dead horse, is so when we go to stitch, that this fabric behind here doesn't get rucked up and your applique stays lovely and flat. Now, of course, there's so many ways to applique. You could actually, well, if you wanted to, I suppose, do like a needle, turn these under. I don't know how you do that. I don't do hand stitching. But you can do that if you want to do it really, really properly, like a beautiful applique. That's what I see like at quilt shows. I'm like, I don't know how they do that. I just stick it out, and this is raw, so it's fine. But again, how do we get this pattern onto our background fabric? So what I've done is I've taken my paper pattern, and I have, just for demonstration, I had gotten this file. It's a file folder, okay, and it's big enough. And there, what I've done is I have actually traced my paper pattern onto this with a pen. I've actually traced it on. Now, I could cut this out. I'm not going to, because I'm not doing it this way. But by all means, you can cut this out, and then you have a sturdier pattern, okay? And then what you could do is you could actually cut your fabric out of here after you pin your pattern on. Very carefully cut each one out, and then you could take your pattern, which is your lovely applique, and you could then glue it with an Elmer's glue stick onto your backing, okay? You could do that by all means. If you want, having stabilized this with either a stabilizer and interfacing your dryer sheets, and then you can perhaps just glue the edges. And you know how much I love my Elmer's glue. However, I'm not doing that for these 4 blocks that I am making. As you know, I'm making identical blocks, not identical fabric. My background is going to be the same. My background is going to be the black and gray and white on the dots. And then each of my corners, my appliqued corners, are going to be in my K-facet, the bright reds, okay? I'm just going to pull 4 different fat quarters. And what I'm going to do is, right now, I'm going to cut a piece. I'm going to look at my... I'm not doing my cardboard fabric pattern right now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a piece of fabric just a little bit bigger than my applique. Just in general, I haven't even ironed this. I'll go over and iron it just so I know my pattern's going to fit. Oops. Okay, now there is a product on the market. There you go. There's a product on the market called, and hopefully I will have addressed this in maybe an introductory video. There's a product on the market, and it's a it's a paper-backed fusible web, okay? It's actually come away from the paper back. Here is this web, okay? Now, it is a gluey side on this side, it's nubbly, and it's glue side on there. So when you transpose, when you put this on your fabric with this glue side down, and I'll show you, then you pull the paper off and you have a double-sided, sticky bit. One that goes on the fabric and then the one that goes on the backing. So again, this product is called, let me cut this off, Wonder Under. 805 Wonder Under is a highly versatile paper-backed fusible web that turns any fabric into a fusible fabric. It has no grain, can be cut and applied in any direction, and is sewing machine safe. The fabric will maintain a soft hand after fusing. 805 Wonder Under bonds fabric to fabric or to any porous surface as wood or cardboard. Oh wow, how about that? So now what you do is you place the rough side of 805 Wonder under the wrong side of fabric. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my piece of fabric that I have already cut, trying to make this so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Move my pattern for a second. And I'm just going to very roughly cut this piece of Wonder Under. Oops. Trying to keep my way out of the tripod there. Okay, so there you go. So this is roughly the size of my fabric here. I'm going to press this really nice. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over, and as you see, this is a gluey side and this is paper. You can hear it. That's a paper side. I'm going to press this really well, iron it really well, onto the wrong side of my fabric, the wrong side. I'm going to put the glue side of my paper down, and with the paper side up, I'm going to iron this onto my fabric piece here. Okay, so what I have done is I have to go onto my ironing board, and what do I always say? I wanted to make this fabric and this paper backing, I want to make it as one. I really don't want it to be floppy. I don't want there to be any air bubbles. I really want that to have fused to the back. So follow the iron instructions. I'm sure they're like 8 to 10 seconds each area with a dry iron. Really fuse that glue. There's glue on the other side of that of this webbing, okay? So now that's all done beautifully. So now what I'm going to do is I have this piece of fabric here fused. I'm going to take my pattern, okay? There's my pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take my fabric. I'm going to fold this. Now remember, it's just cut roughly, so we don't have to worry about the edges. I'm going to sort of fold that in half. Now this is a little bit unconventional, but this is how I do it, and it works. It works pretty good. So I'm going to fold this in half. Now you remember there's paper on the back side, so it folds pretty nicely. And then I'm going to fold it. You can see where I'm going with this. I am just going to be cutting out my pattern from my fabric here. It's a little bit thick and it's a little bit slightly challenging, but not really. So again, remember how we made our pattern? We had a fold here and two folds here. So now I have my fold here and I have my fold there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly like I did with my paper pattern. Now it's a little bit ungainly and you need a really nice pair of sharp scissors, but I'm just going to put right there and right there. This may be not how a lot of people do it, but this is how I do it. And what do I have here? I have 1, 2, 3. I have 1, 2, 3 folds and 1 fold there. Now I'm going to take my pattern, put it on the top there. This is a little bit bigger, which is fine. And I'm just going to hold everything really tightly. And again, you don't have to worry if it doesn't turn out perfect, because what is it? Everything that's been folded and cut is actually sort of mirroring the same exact thing. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm holding my pattern really tightly. There is my applique, 1/8 of it. Fabric, backed, 1/4, 1/2, and my whole applique. There's my whole applique. Now, what I want to do is I want to remove this paper backing. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get this paper backing off. So what you want to do is you just want to sort of score it. Just score it with a pin, and then just start ripping the paper backing off. And you will know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift out my applique, and I'm going to center it, making sure it's really lovely and flat. Hot, dry iron. I'm just going to set that glue. Now, just like for me, just like my Dresden plate, I'm going to do a little bit of a smaller blanket stitch with white thread. Again, I'm at my brother's sewing machine, and I have this set up with a blanket stitch, which is not quite as wide as my blanket stitch that I did for my Dresden plate. But this is how I'm just going to start there. I'm making sure that my needle is just following along on the edge so that my little bites come into the applique. Now I will hold this. You can see my blanket stitch sort of goes back and forth. I just will guide this. But I want to show you after I do this little bit. Sorry, my hands are in the way. I'm going to come up here to that point, and again, just like in the Dresden plate, my needle's down, my presser foot is up, and then I'm just going to sort of come back on that bit there, that point. Come back in the valley. I always leave my needle down all the while, and then I'm just gonna, I have a beauty of my presser foot will lift automatically. If you have an automatic presser foot lifter upper, then you by all means use that. As you can see, my stitches are riding right alongside the applique, not getting onto the top of the applique. Hopefully you can see that. My lighting isn't as good here as my Juki. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish blanket stitching this applique. Off my machine, my applique is laying really nice and flat. It's not rucked up at all. As I said, I think my fusible web, my Wonder Under, has done the trick of not rucking that seam up there. And as you can see, my back looks as good as my front. There you go. It's lovely and flat. Now what I am going to do is I'll just bring this over, and I'm going to cut my block down to 12.5 inches. So I'll just trim up one side. Yeah, this is measuring about 13 inches. So I'll just trim up one side. I just sort of eyeball it. Put that on the fold there. Take a little bit off at a time. Straighten up my sides. And I'm looking at my 12.5 inches here. Oops. Yeah, my 12.5 inches here, my 12.5 inches here. I'll just take off a little bit. Again, I suppose there's a real proper way to do this, but I just sort of eyeball it. And it's about 12 3/4, so take off a little bit more. And let me see, it looks pretty good. That is 12.5 inches. Look at that. 12.5 inches that way. And 12.5 inches, 12.5 inches that way. There's my appliques. So I hope you enjoy this. Again, this will take some time for you beginners, but it's not hard, as you can see. Go slowly. And again, whatever stitch you want. I liked my blanket stitch there. My white thread, it almost sort of looks organic. I quite like that, but from a distance you can't even tell. You can just see a pretty applique. So, I love you. Hope you love it, folks. And again, thanks for following along. And love from the Trueloves. See ya.